Hello folks, today we're going to be looking at the 5 traits of the Dark Empath. I should say up front, there isn't actually a clinical entity called a Dark Empath, but it is a way of understanding an abusive personality type. The first trait that identifies somebody as being a Dark Empath is that they don't get much of a payoff from normal social interaction, even though they are technically very cognitively empathic. They don't really enjoy being around people, and they're marked for being quite emotionally detached from the people around them. This is all despite the fact that they actually do crave an awful lot of attention. So they're highly empathic, but in a completely cognitive way. They crave a lot of attention and they don't get much joy from being around people. The second trait that identifies somebody as a Dark Empath is their heightened ability to effectively map other people. They're very, very good at looking at other people and mapping what they're all about. They're not particularly good at mapping themselves and their own motivations. The third thing that would identify somebody as being a Dark Empath is that they're particularly detached emotionally. They're very distant emotionally. They're quite cold as a personality. The fourth trait that identifies somebody as being a Dark Empath is their grandiosity. They're extremely grandiose, but that grandiosity is pushed back and is in a sort of a dynamic polarity fight with a pronounced degree of self-criticism. The fifth trait that identifies somebody as a Dark Empath is that they are exploitative interpersonally. They really lack any sense of morality and they can be very, very cruel. Those are the 5 traits that identify somebody as a Dark Empath, which, as I said, is a non-clinical definition. What I think is happening is you're really talking about the classic case of somebody who has fragile or covert narcissism, which means that even though they believe that they're entitled to special treatment by people, they actually struggle to get that special treatment from people, and that evokes an awful lot of feelings of shame in them. So they're constantly in this exhausting cycle of feeling very, very grandiose, of having these delusional, grandiose ideas about themselves, but then when they get into reality, they fail to convince others. They can't be classic grandiose narcissists because they fail to convince the world of their specialness, of their superiority. Every time they go out into the world, and they fail to do that, it induces narcissistic injury, which then of course induces narcissistic rage. So people who some would describe as a Dark Empath, I would just say that's a covert or vulnerable narcissist. Actually, they experience more rage than grandiose narcissists. Interestingly enough, some of the research that I read indicates that there's a higher degree of propensity towards violence amongst those defined as covert narcissists versus those defined as classic narcissists, because of the frustration, because of the constant idealized self-injury, that narcissistic injury. They can actually be more violent than grandiose narcissists who are not really known for being particularly violent. In the literature that I read, they particularly pointed out domestic violence, violence towards children, and violence towards animals as being correlated with covert narcissism. Now, if a Dark Empath is a covert narcissist, which I'm claiming, I could be wrong, then that is a trait that you could find amongst people who have been defined as Dark Empaths as well. The core to this is delusion, grandiosity, the sense of entitlement, the desire to take revenge on people. This is a very vengeful personality type. This is a very sensitive personality type. The person that you're defining as being a Dark Empath, you may also notice that you get to a point with them where, even though they are quite empathetic, and you can say, no, they're definitely empathetic because they definitely understand the feelings of other people, and yet you still notice that they're hypersensitive to criticism and they are actually prone to being quite emotionally dysregulated. You may not see any overt displays of anger, but at a certain level you realize there is a threat there and they are actually getting quite angry. What this leads to, typically, is the sense that you have to walk on eggshells to be around this person. At that point, when you're looking at all of the different personality disorders, you can start to see how if a Dark Empath is a mirror model, let's say, of a covert narcissist, these are the areas where covert narcissism can sometimes start vectoring in with borderline personality disorder, where the person's very emotionally dysregulated. They're potentially prone to extreme rage, but with a dark empath, it probably would be a cold rage. They're not going to actually start throwing things and shouting and showing you. No demonstrative rage, but the rage manifests in their desire for vengeance. And so if they are slighted, they will go after the person with a high degree of persistence. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to know more about overcoming relationships with narcissistic personality types, please check out my new course, Unplug from the Matrix of Narcissistic Abuse. It's available from this link down here. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you.